Hi, it's Ian with video number 4 of the Japanese Knife Sharpening Fundamentals series. In the first 3 videos, we talked about the setup and the main concepts and worked on sharpening both sides with 1000 grit medium grit stone, and then finished with a finishing side where we sharpened and then started to polish and remove the burr so that it's a nice clean edge. So it's pretty much the same exact steps for the finishing side as the medium grit side, and it's just a matter of looking at it and feeling to see if the burr is removed, and I feel like this is in a good place. So we could finish here, or I like to do one last step of doing a strop motion on the stone. So a strop is usually something that we think of a leather strop, piece of leather where you pull the knife with a kind of a backward stroke to try to clean up and polish the edge further than what you could do on a stone like this. But I tend not to use, I do have a leather strop that I made, but I tend not to use it because I like the results that I get from using a finishing stone. So this is a 6000 grit, and sometimes I don't even go this high. Sometimes I might go with a 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 grit. So this would be at the very end stage where I feel like all the burr is cleaned off and removed and the blade looks polished and even, and it seems like I could end there, but I'm just going to do one last thing, this one last step of cleaning it up. So the motion I use is going to be one forward motion here with almost zero pressure here. Stop, flip it over, and then reverse coming back this way. Stop, flip it over, start with a tip, and then no need to go fast. It's all about trying to keep the same angle as we have done for sharpening and burr removal. We're just doing these pretty light strokes, almost no pressure. I'm just keeping this as a guide and making sure that it doesn't rattle on the stone. So there's a tiny amount of light bit of pressure, but it's almost nothing. And again, I'm trying to keep my fingers over the stone. Once you're used to it, you might be able to do something like this, as long as you're not putting too much pressure on it. You might be able to do that once you're comfortable, but I think, especially initially, it might be a good idea to keep the left hand over the stone like this. Some knives have very, very pointy tips. This one is not so bad, but something like this one is more pointy. And to avoid digging in, one of the things that John taught me is to do a J shape like this. So we start with almost like a backstroke here, and then continue up. So instead of digging in straight, we start with a little kind of a half circle motion and do this. So it looks like a J starting on the bottom. And then the reverses should be the same. So that was one set, just going up and down is one. So often I will do about 10 or 15 sets. And usually I notice how the sound and the feeling changes. There's less crunchiness. It feels smoother and smoother as I do this. And the sound becomes more smooth as well. No need to go this fast until you're used to it. Going like this, controlled and slow, I would prefer that rather than trying to speed through, because we're trying to teach ourselves good technique. And eventually we can add speed and it won't compromise good technique and accuracy of pressure and angle. Okay, so that was approximately 20 sets, I believe. And now it should feel very smooth. Examine it. Make sure it's completely dry. Dry it off with your dry towel. And then we'll do the same thing we did earlier. Now when I'm only pushing very little pressure. It's barely even going in 1 millimeter. So we're not trying to cut into it. It's not really a cut. It's more like just about a 0.5 millimeter, some pressure. And after 3 or 4 strokes, I feel how smooth it's becoming. Now make sure you use good, safe technique with this also. Put it on something, put it down on a table, or in this case, I'm using the stone. Make sure you don't hold it and slip and cut yourself. This knife is actually very sharp right now, so you have to make sure we're being careful and safe. So that was about 10 pulls or so, maybe 12. And let's see how. So it's much smoother. There's a little catching spot right here, right now, which I don't think it wasn't because of not enough strokes here. I think it's probably just missing the very, very edge here. But once I get past there, it's extremely smooth. It's quite smooth for such a low quality blade. So this would be, in most kitchens, I think this kind of sharpness would be extremely appreciated. And if your kitchen has dull knives, or you don't get them sharpened often, or you don't sharpen them yourselves, then you probably notice that this is probably your sharpest knife right now, even this $1 knife from Goodwill. So if I was going to make this perfect, then I would spend a little bit more time here to see if I can get rid of that little catch that's going on right in the first inch or so of the heel. The rest of it is okay. I'm pretty happy with that. We still have the Sharpie mark, and this can be taken off with a nail polish remover. So put some of that on and let it sit just for a few seconds, and should be able to wipe it off. Sometimes using a cleanser, something like Barkeeper's Friend or Bon Ami, that can take it off. Sometimes just putting it on the stone, a fine stone like this might take it off. It kind of depends on the kind of knife it is. So yeah. And of course, the Sharpie method is not required. You could just try it on your own and kind of go at it. But I think at least the first couple of times you sharpen that particular knife, it might be a good idea to see what's going on and kind of adjust. And maybe you can make a note that where the Sharpie is coming off appropriately is this many coins. I didn't use them this time, but I also have some dimes, which are thinner. Maybe it's like 2 quarters and a dime or something like that. 1 quarter and 2 dimes or whatever. So that you can sort of get used to what it feels like and what it looks like as you learn how to sharpen your own knives. So this is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it, except for the very end. It's not like I'm going to use this in the kitchen, so it's not that worried about it. But very quickly, I will spend a couple of minutes going through the same steps on my Gyuto. This is the knife I actually use. This is quite high quality. It's a carbon steel knife with a stainless cladding. It's not dull by any means, but it could use a little touch up. So let's see. I'll just spend a few minutes doing the same exact process, but it should go very, very quickly. The Burr formation, I'm expecting it will only take a few strokes. Okay, it's there already, up to there. There's no Sharpie, but I can tell that where the angle is in the light. Continue. plenty. There's plenty of burr formation, and it's all completely consistent. So that's the difference between a well-maintained, high-quality knife using good technique and what we've been using up to this point. Okay, I'm going to go to the second side. Plenty of burr there. Okay, I'm happy with that. Just making sure that the wear pattern is good. It looks consistent. I might just do the tip just a little bit. The tip can be a little bit of a challenge if it curves. The more it curves, the more difficult it is. If you have a knife like a nakiri, there's very little curvature. It's pretty much all straight. There's a tiny bit of curve on this knife up here. But in general, a knife like that is much easier. You don't have to really adjust for that kind of curvature. So in this case, I was noticing the wear pattern on the very tip. Just needs a little adjustment. That looks good. So all the burr came right back to the other side. So I'm already in the burr removal process. That's how quickly this is going. It's coming back this way. I hear a little crunchiness, so I'm going to very quickly get rid of extraneous material here. Water. Okay, second side. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Burr is cleaned up. I will check the grabs completely. Totally grabs, no problem whatsoever. Okay, so next I will flip it over and clean and polish. This knife, by the way, the carbon steel is Aogami blue, or super, blue super. Aogami just means blue paper. And there's different kinds of aogami or blue carbon steel, but this one is the super. So it's known for sharpening pretty well on stones and good edge retention. It's a fairly hard carbon steel. So it definitely does sharpen very well on stones. This is not the stone set I usually use. I typically use different stones when I'm sharpening, but this is a great beginner combo stone. Also comes with a base, so you don't even need anything to raise it, which is sometimes nice to have. The main thing isn't for it not to slip. So the base has some rubber feet that allows it to stay in place. And this stone is quite inexpensive, perfectly adequate, but you can always upgrade your gear, of course. And the better stones have a little bit better performance. It feels better and it cuts faster and has a smoother end result. Okay, so I've quickly sharpened and done burr removal. So I'm going to go into the stropping stage. I try to feel and also listen to the sound to determine how long I will go. Okay, that was probably more than necessary since everything was going very quickly. Let's clean it up. Okay, it feels quite smooth. After the first 2 strokes or so, it was definitely feeling smooth already. Make sure the knife is nice and dry before we try the newspaper test. See how we did. No resistance. Okay, so it push cuts. So usually when you do the newspaper test, it's easier, of course, if you slice into it, but push cutting, no slicing, but push cutting, that's a more difficult test for sharpness. Another more difficult test might be to fold over the newspaper like this and see if it can grab into that smooth side, which this does very easily. There's no problem on that test. So that's telling us that it's smooth, there's nothing catching, so there's no chips, but it still has enough bite that it'll grab something as smooth as the very, very, very rounded edge. It's zero problems on newspaper, which doesn't tell us everything that we need to know about the knife performance in the kitchen, but it's one good tool to determine how we're doing with the different stages of sharpening, and if there's possible problems, whether it's still dull, the tip is still rounded, or there's still material like some burr formation or kind of rounded over edge that's left over, or chipping that would catch, or roughness that would feel like it's kind of like a sawing kind of sound, which was happening earlier with the other knife. Or if it doesn't pass the rounded test, that might be telling you that the edge is too smooth, and even though it's sharp, it might not be able to catch food. So, for example, classically, very ripe tomato skin, the flesh inside is so soft and juicy, and the skin, it might have a hard time grabbing, even though the knife is extremely sharp. That would be one example of if a knife doesn't pass the rounded paper test. It could be extremely sharp. For example, if I continued with the 6000, if I spent more time and got the serrations, micro serrations, smaller and smaller and smaller, or more extreme example would be to go to like a 10,000 grit finishing stone, and it makes it so sharp that it can pass things like newspaper tests, no problem. It would be extremely smooth, but then when you start to try to cut into a tomato skin or a bell pepper skin, it might have some trouble grabbing because the teeth are so fine that, anything that requires some kind of bite, it may fail in that case. So if that did happen, that has happened in the past with some knives that I have, where I take it up to 8 or 10,000 grit, which I typically don't, but if I have done that with that knife and it passes the newspaper test, but it doesn't cut the tomato skin or the bell pepper skin. So in that case, I have to go back and add some teeth back. Go down to a lower grit. Could be this. Could be something like 2,000 or 3,000 grit. Could be 1,000, and then go back. So all of these things usually are not requests that you can make when somebody else is sharpening your knives. If you take it to a shop, a really good sharpener, you can specify exactly what you're looking for, and they will do it for you gladly. But many knife sharpening services that I've seen or used or heard about from others, they will not be able to accommodate those requests, much less other things like the cutting angle, how thin you want the blade, the geometry, and such. There's a lot of different things that go into it. So the worst thing is when you send a knife in and they put it on a machine and a whole bunch of metal has been removed and the shape is different from how you like it, and the blade edge finishing is different from how you like it. All of these things have happened to me, which is why I started doing this myself a number of years ago, and I'm extremely glad to have done that and to keep working on improving my skill. And also get better knives, which makes it more fun to cook in the kitchen, and also get better tools so that sharpening gets faster and I'm able to do a bigger variety of things. So anyway, that is the end of this series, and hopefully you found it interesting, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Send me an email through my website, and I'll try to accommodate any questions or requests. So until then, see you next time.